Everyone, welcome back to the How to Podcast series. I have someone on my screen today, which makes me happy because we sat down and had a little chat in Calgary, but we're both not from Calgary, and we're both from Ontario. But my guess, once you hear his voice, you're going to be like, oh, it is that Danny Brown. Yes, it's that Danny Brown. He's on the show. Podcaster, he's an author, he does everything. He'll even clean your windows, which is great. Danny, welcome to the How to Podcast series as my guest co-host. Glad to have you here.
Thank you so much. And I'm excited to be here. Like you said, we had a good chat back in Calgary last month now, September. Yeah, It's been a month already, which I really enjoyed catching up, getting to meet you and your family and just talk about podcasting. And you had a great episode about the recap and everything. So, yeah, I'm not the Danny Brown from, I don't know where he's from, Philly, the Detroit rapper. Not Danny Brown, no.
I love your accent. My family's I draw my roots from Scotland. I definitely don't have that rich, beautiful accent that you have. Tell us where you're originally from. Tell us a little bit more about that story too.
Yeah, sure. So originally Edinburgh, Scotland. So born and raised up until just before being a teen in Edinburgh. And then my family moved to the Scottish borders when I was, I'm going to say 11 or 12. Just for work. My stepdad couldn't get a job at the time. He was a coal miner, so this was at the time in the 70s, early 80s when the coal mine strikes were happening, and the Thatcher years in the UK, etc. So we moved to a place called Hawick, which is in the Scottish borders, because my mum's sister lived there. So I guess that makes her my aunt, probably. So she lived there, and there was more opportunities down there, seemingly. So we moved there when I was 11, 12-year-old. So I went to high school, so I guess secondary school in Scotland, high school in North America, Canada, etc. So I lived and worked in Hawick until, I'm going to say 1992. So I don't know what age that would have made me, 23, 24, something like that. And then moved to work in England. And I spent many a year there until 2006, which is when I came to your beautiful country.
Excellent. What brought you to Canada? I don't know the story.
Yeah, it was a girl. Isn't it always a way? It's always a girl.
There you go.
Now, my wife and I are huge fans. We're huge music fans and indie music and emo music at the time. So we were both, and we still are, huge fans of the band Dashboard Confessional. So we were on the official website, like fan forum kind of thing. And I'd published I think I'd published a review of some Scottish punk music or some bands to check out. If you liked early Dashboard, here's some influences that Chris, the lead singer, has mentioned, where he got his influences from. So I dropped in some names of these bands and some songs people should check out. And my now wife saw this, and she's also, like yourself, Dave, she's also got Scottish roots. Her granddad was from Glasgow. So she saw, Scottish, okay, I'm kind of Scottish, that kind of thing. So she checked it out, we got talking, we just recommended each other more stuff to listen to. And then, I don't know, that was harmless talking. And then 6 months after that, something clicked. She came over to the UK for a visit in October 2006. Stayed a week, had a great time. We got on like a house on fire. I came over here, December 2006, meant to stay a week over the Christmas period and never went back. And here we are almost 20 years later. 2 kids, got the dog, all the usual kind of stuff.
What are your thoughts about Canada from your perspective? What do you think? What do you like about this country?
I love the space. It's such a wide. I mean, obviously you've got the large cities. You got Toronto, you got Vancouver, Calgary, etc. But even Calgary is a bit more open and planned, I feel, than say a Toronto. So you get your big cities, but apart from it, once you get out of that, you can drive anywhere within, say, 15 minutes in most Canadian cities, I feel, and be in really lush, nice, open, wide space. And I find that coming from Scotland, I always enjoyed that. Like living in the Scottish borders, it was always spacious, green hills, trees, all that cool stuff that I just love. And that's what I love about Canada. I know there's some changes happened in the last few years, like everywhere, but I still find that for the most part, Canadians are really friendly, really nice people. They live up to the stereotypes.
Yeah. We're glad to have you here.
Thank you.
Great. So podcasting wise, I am part of the Captivate family, and I know that's a big part of your life as a part of the team there. I have I think 4 or 5 of my podcasts now on your platform. I love everything about what you guys do there. I love the fact that you support us as indie podcasters. And between you and Mark, I love the tone of your in and around podcasting, because you really do focus on the indie side of podcasting. I know we have some really amazing big shows out there in the podcast space. They do bring a lot of people to podcasting from a listener side. So we need those big shows. But there's a vast majority of us are small, independent, one or two people operated shows that kind of do everything in-house. And I love the fact that the tone of your show, and when the two of you get together, that you really do focus in on us. And that speaks to me. That brought me to Captivate, just so you know. Listening to Mark, listening to you, and then, like all of the stuff you guys do for content, that's what brought me over and made me move from my hosting site to you. Talk a little bit, for those who don't know Captivate.fm. Let's do a little commercial at the beginning here, because it's a big part of what you do and how you represent podcasting. Tell us a little bit more about the platform, and maybe how is it different from some of the other hosting sites that are out there that can host our files.
Yeah, sure. So much like you, I was a Captivate user for the longest time. I think I was a Captivate customer for about a year before I joined the team. And what attracted me as a podcaster was at the time, there's more podcast hosts doing it now, but at the time, I think it was one of the few hosts that gave all features to all podcasters from day one. The only thing that you'd get charged for was by monthly downloads, because that's a physical hard cost to Captivate. So that's what Captivate charges for. But all other features you could access right away. And with the previous host I was on, if I wanted to have a second podcast, I'd have to have a second podcast account, which is another monthly charge on top of what I was already paying. If I wanted, let's say, more advanced analytics, I'd have to bump up a tier or pay an extra $5-6 a month or whatever it looked like to access these analytics. Whereas with Captivate, I could get them as part of the plan, even like the lowest personal plan, for example, or the podcaster plan, as it was called at the time. I joined the Captivate team in 2020 on the support side. I'm now head of podcaster support and experience there. And we're all passionate podcasters. You mentioned Mark, myself, Gary, who's the head of design. Mm-hmm. He's got his own podcast. He's also co-hosts a Star Wars podcast with Mark. We've got Kieran, our head of development, and he's a podcaster. Pierre, he's got his Crazy Pasta or Bad Pasta podcast. And so everybody's like, we're podcasters. We'd still be in the space anyway if Captivate wasn't around. And Captivate's byline has always been the only growth-oriented hosting platform for serious indie podcasters. It's why we don't have a free plan. We don't have a freemium model, because we only want to work with certain types of podcasters. And that's podcasters that know what it takes to produce and grow a podcast. And it doesn't mean you have to spend lots of money on that, but you're invested in the success of your show. There's nothing wrong with free podcast hosting companies, but you tend to find it. If I know I did it. I was on Anchor for the longest time, way back when it first came out. And I created a load of shows that went nowhere, but probably clog up a lot of feeds now because they're still active and they've got test, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're paying for a podcast host, whether that's Captivate, Transistor, Buzzsprout, whoever that might look like, you are kind of invested more in using the features and actually trying to grow your podcast, and using the help articles and tutorials and content, etc., that hosting company sends out, because they know what it takes to grow a podcast. And it's why we have two mantras at Captivate as well. We'll either help save you money or save you time with the features that we release to our podcasters. So that saves you having to use third-party platforms. So we have a guest booking feature that kind of does a lot of what Calendly does, but obviously Calendly is a more premium option, so they have more features than that. But if you want a simple guest booking feature, that's included in Captivate, saves you time. Save with episode planning, that can replace like a Notion or a Monday or something like that. You can do all that within in-house. So on the production side, we want to save you time and money producing, but then we want to help you grow. So whether that's with our dynamic tool like Amy that allows you to do dynamic inserts, our new Spark AI that we just released last month, I'm going to say, or maybe even earlier this month, I'm not sure. Time flies. Yeah. We want to release features that will, help grow your show, whatever that looks like. So grow your expertise, Dave, grow your speaking opportunities at events, grow your client opportunities, or grow your listeners, downloads, monetization options. So if we don't meet the time-saving and money-saving option, and we don't meet the growth option, we won't release a feature. And I feel that's where we tend to separate ourselves from not all hosts, but a lot of other hosting companies. Is we are all passionate podcasters. We were podcasting long before Captivate came along, and we've got a very set approach as to what do we do from a feature point of view. We don't just release a feature because everybody else has one, and it's why we took so long to release podcasting 2.0 features. We wanted to make sure it was the right ones for our podcaster needs. So that was like a bit longer than a short ad. I apologize for taking up your time there, mate.
I haven't had a lot of people on, Danny, to talk about podcasting 2.0. There's a lot of people in the space that listen to this show that are curious about it. I haven't, in content-wise, gone down that rabbit hole yet because I don't know enough to speak to it. But from your perspective, I'm interested if you can kind of give us like the umbrella overview of what podcasting 2.0 is, specifically for somebody that's a single podcaster, doesn't really make any money to date with their podcast, but doesn't really understand the technology behind it. Can you kind of make it make sense for us so that we have an understanding so we can get deeper into that later?
Yeah. So, I mean, podcasting 2.0, as the name suggests, it's essentially like a sequel to RSS. So, RSS has always driven podcasts. It drove blog posts forever before podcasts came along, and it now drives, podcasting shows and episodes, etc. Apple, Spotify, etc. pull your show in from the RSS feed, and Podcast 2.0 makes it more interactive. So, it gives you features. They're called Podcasting 2.0 tags, but that can sometimes put people off, trying to understand it, because then you get really technical and into the weeds with it. If you call it features, that's easier to understand. So it's features to help you make your show more interactive for listeners. So that might be transcripts. It might be chapters. It might be value for value and funding, where listeners can support you through a multitude of options. It may be putting in the person tag, so you can give credits to the person involved in your show. So if you're helping clients, Dave, and they want to give you credit as the editor, they can put your name in as part of the person tag or the person feature. There's me going on tags already. So it's just a way of making it really easy for podcasters, regardless of your technical expertise, to make your podcast super interactive for listeners and get them more involved with your show.
I like it. Okay. And then from your side, you have multiple podcasts. You've done many in the past. You have some active ones as well right now. Tell us an overview of the podcast that you're hosting currently.
Yeah, so I'm one of the great things I like about Captivate, and I know you mentioned you've got 5 or 6, and I think we both said to each other we're probably serial podcasters when we chatted at the Pod Summit event, mate. But yeah, I mean, I've got 3 currently active, and many more either archived or closed off, sunsetted or whatever. The 3 that I've got active at the moment, there's 2 that I host myself, and then the one, as you mentioned, I co-host with Mark. So I host 1 Minute Podcast Tips, which, as the name suggests, it's podcast tips in a minute. So basically, tagline super simple: be a better podcaster in just a minute a week. They're really short tips, and it allows you to choose if I want to listen to that episode or not, because it doesn't affect me. That tip doesn't improve me, but that next one might. So I'll listen to that episode instead. Super easy to binge. That's a weekly podcast. I also do 1 minute podcast tips, 5 random questions, which I just started this year, and I'm really enjoying it. And I need to get you on it, actually, by the way, so I'll get you an invite over later today. But yeah, that's, again, as the name suggests, I get a guest on, I use an online random question generator, and I pull 5 random questions out. The guest doesn't know what the questions are. I've never seen them. And we discuss the question, and they give me an answer. And that can go anywhere. It can be funny, it can be serious, it can be somber, it can be, just off the charts. It's been real entertaining to do that. I'm about to, season 2 will be launching next Thursday, I believe. So yeah, 31st of October. Yeah, so end of October, season 2, episode 1, or I guess it'll be episode 14 or whatever. That'll drop then. And then, as you mentioned, In and Around Podcasting at Who with Mark, which is an industry podcast show that we take basically the top, the stuff that generally gets spoken about by the larger brands and the podcasters and etc. and professionals in the industry, but we bring it down and we try simplify it and bring it to the indie podcaster level. What does this mean for you as an indie podcaster? Why should you care about AI in podcasting? Why should you care about ad revenue drying up, if that's what it means? Why should you care about XYZ? And how does that affect you long term as an indie podcaster? And that's something that Mark wanted to do for a long time, and we launched that earlier this year as well. also on a hiatus, but we'll be dropping the new episodes first week in November, so within 2 weeks' time.
Beautiful. I really love the In and Around podcasting. I love when you and Mark, there's been episodes where the two of you have kind of stepped aside from like a real structured episode, and Mark and yourself, you just share how you're feeling about podcasting in the moment. And there's been some very passionate episodes, I know for particular, where Mark just kind of felt like he was just unloading kind of a little bit of frustration, a little bit of, just wanting the best for us as podcasters. And that connection, I had to re-listen to that episode over and over again, because I could tell that he didn't even know what he was going to say next. It just seemed like he just wanted to share his heart for podcasters. And again, that brought me to Captivate. I just want you to know, I just listening to how you guys show up for us. If anybody hasn't listened to the show, you have to. I just love that you're focused on the listener. A lot of podcasts about podcasting done by podcast hosting sites tend to be really kind of technology, tend to be new features, tend to be kind of high level in that, which is fine. But when the two of you step aside from that in content and start talking to us, just kind of from your heart and where your vision is for podcasting, I tell you, I have to listen with more intent, because there's something special about how you present that in those moments. So I just want to say thank you for those. And please let Mark know that those were very meaningful for me personally, and for the people that I've talked to. They really enjoy those.
I will. And thank you for that. And that's what attracted me to Captivate, was hearing Mark talk. He used to have a show called the Podcast Accelerator, which he sunsetted.
He'd been doing episode of that.
Yeah, and he'd been doing for 3-4 years, I think. There was many episodes of that. And this is where In and Around podcasting came from, was basically the next iteration, if you like, of Mark's solo show. But yeah, I mean, Mark's a hugely passionate podcaster, and he has no time for charlatans or people that try to, rip indie podcasters off, because he knows, like I say, we're all passionate podcasters at Captivate. He knows what it takes and what it costs and what's involved in bringing a show out. And for someone to take advantage of that and try to charge you money because they can say, we can get you all these downloads, or we can get you these reviews, or I can edit your show, but all I'm actually going to do is stick it through the script and tell you I edited it. Right. We have no time for that. And nothing wrong with the script, by the way. That's a great tool. Yeah. But don't push yourself as an editor and then run it through an AI tool and then say, I did all this for you, and I'm going to charge you $1,000 for it. So yeah, I know where you're coming from on that, mate. And when I hear him go, I can sort of tell when Mark's about to go off on one thing. Okay, I'm just going to sit back and enjoy.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. You did a live recording of In and Around podcasting at Pod Summit this year. How were the nerves doing a live recording in front of an audience? Like, take us through behind the scenes of that. And you posted that episode, and you gave me a little shout out at the end for my buy me a coffee comment, which my wife slapped me in the stands. She's like, he just said your name. And I'm like, holy crap. Anyways, talk about recording live in front of an audience. Have you ever done that before?
Not a podcast. I've been on live panels and stuff like that before, but not an actual podcast, especially one that I was leading essentially. So I think I was fine from a nerve point of view. My main concern, and I kept the Saturday, so we did the live one on the Saturday, which was day 2 of the event, and I kept saying to Tim, how am I going to get the intro and outro and the segments? Because obviously, as you know, we have segments. Yeah. We have like a original theme song, which I love. We have like the segments with its own theme songs and stuff like that. And trying to do that, normally we'll do that in post, and we'll do it, with our dynamic inserts and add it that way. But you can't do that when you're trying to do the live stream, because then you're going to have blank pauses, and then the audience is going to be thinking, well, what's going on here? So we were trying to work out how to get it in, and we eventually got it in, and it sounded fine. It came across really well, I think. So I think my main one was that, making sure that we had the full show experience, if you like. But also, 2 things as well on top of that. Also the timing, because we record normally using Riverside for remote. So obviously you've got your little timer up there, and you know what length the episode's going to. And we knew that we were on a schedule, or tight schedule, with the live recording, because you've got lunch and then other recordings and all that tracks, etc. And I didn't have a clock, and I kept looking at Tim, and he was giving me a countdown, and we got to like the last 5 minutes, and I still had the 2 segments to go, plus
Right.
the outro. I was thinking, okay, now it's going to be fun trying to get that done. And then the third one was, I think you'd mentioned in your episode, mate, is how do I involve the audience, the listeners? Because you
Yeah.
don't want to just sit there and me look at Tim or me look at Katie, who was the
Yeah.
2 co-hosts for the episode, and then you've got the audience sitting there just watching 3 people on stage, which I don't think is super exciting. So trying to involve the audience, but also be respectful of the fact that this is a podcast that the listeners aren't going to be part of the audience, right? So then if you drop out too much, does that have a disconnect with the
Right.
at-home audience when they listen back afterwards? So I think that was more what was going through my head, trying to figure that out, how that would work, and then how it would play out on the day, so to speak.
Yeah, from an audience point of view, I didn't know if we were allowed to clap. I didn't know if we were allowed to make a noise. I didn't know if we were to be just quiet. And I think all of us defaulted to quiet because we didn't know what was going on. Like I would have loved to have been hooting and hollering and making noise and clapping, but I didn't know my place. So we just kind of was a little more reserved. That would be one thing from my point of view in a live setting. You know, what do you expect from the audience? Can we be vocal? Can we clap? You know, so anyways, that was kind of fun though. But I loved watching you. You handled it like a seasoned pro. I don't know many podcasters who are brand new to podcasting would ever put themselves in that situation to record live and try to make all those plates balance at once. But you did a great job. It was really fun.
Oh, thank you. That's good feedback. Because I know Tim was asking, like he sent a survey out afterwards to the speakers, etc., asking for some feedback, and that's a good one because I know it wasn't quite clear. Should you be quiet during recording? Should you be like an active, like the live one or the last one that came out from the CBC guys?
Right.
You know, that obviously lent itself to more audience interaction. But yeah, it'd be good to know moving forward. Can the host sort of advise the audience? You know, it's perfectly fine if you want to get involved in that. If you want to laugh, shout, disagree, or whatever, and holler out, then maybe I'll leave the host to set that expectation pre-live recording.
It's excellent. No, it was a really good experience. I love Pod Summit. I love the fact that you and I got to meet in person. Again, I'm a big fan of what you do in podcasting. So to have a few moments around lunch together, that was really great. So thank you for making the trip out there as well. It was great to see another Ontario person out there.
Yeah, it was a good mixture, wasn't it? Like there's people from all over Canada.
Yeah. So as you look ahead into podcasting, Danny, what excites you about podcasting, and what frustrates you about podcasting in the moment? Where are we headed?
So I think probably what excites me, there's always something new coming down the line. Sometimes good, sometimes not so good. And I know there's a lot of discussion about AI in podcasting at the moment, and I completely get it. As a voiceover, I mean, I'm not a voiceover artist, but I know voiceover artists, and I see the frustration about AI and how that could be putting a lot of them out of work, and I completely get that. But then there's the other side of AI where it can be really useful, you know, for podcasting. So I'm curious to see where that goes, as long as it's done properly. You know, it's not people just using AI to be lazy and passing it off as their own work or whatever. Really looking forward to seeing where podcasting 2.0 goes. I know we spoke about it briefly, but it's prior to probably iOS 17 and maybe earlier this year. Podcasting 2.0 was always sort of kind of most restricted to smaller podcast apps. So, and I say smaller podcast apps, have still got a great user base, but apps like Pocket Casts, Podcast Addict, Anytime Player, Fountain, all these cool apps that were doing very cool stuff with podcasting 2.0 features, but Apple wasn't doing it and Spotify wasn't doing it. And until you get the two big guys doing it, it kind of lacks the validation and the uptake, you know, of podcasters and listeners, you know, using the features. But Apple's now supporting chapters, they supported transcripts, they're supporting more features like that. Spotify have had chapters for a while, but they have to be in the show notes, and hopefully they'll start to bring the 2.0, you know, audio file chapters. They've got transcripts, although again, that's only on certain shows at the minute, but they are rolling that out as well. So it's nice to see the bigger players support the 2.0 features, which encourages developers to up their involvement, which can only benefit the podcasters and the listeners at the end of the day. So I feel that's what I'm looking forward to. I think from a frustration point of view, it probably goes back to I feel what you were speaking about with one of the episodes with Mark, or some of the episodes with Mark, where we are turning. We see a lot of online pushback now by certain, well-known names. That could be brands, could be people. I'm not saying either or, but well-known names in the podcasting space that push back on certain advances and saying, well, that's not. It's not a podcast if it's not RSS. It's not a podcast if it's on YouTube. It's not a podcast if you've used any AI tools or whatever. I get it, but I feel that becomes gatekeeping. And I think I tweeted about this like really briefly. I didn't go into it in depth. A couple of weeks back, we're seeing a lot of people, like, podcasting was created to avoid gatekeepers. That's why the RSS feeds there. It's an open platform. It means you can publish anything you want. There's no restrictions. Obviously, if it's hate speech or anything horrible like that, then yes, there should be major pushback. You should get kicked off, platforms. That's just my own personal opinion. So that's why RSS was created, to take away that sort of barrier and make it fully open source that anybody could be involved in. But now you see certain pushback on certain aspects of podcasting that's turning some of the original, leaders in the space into the gatekeepers now, which I find kind of strange, because now you're being told, well, if you use AI in podcasting this way, we're going to out and name and shame you and create a list, for that. If you do X, Y, Z. So that frustrates me, I feel, where we're almost pushing back on new creators wanting to join podcasting and try it for the first time, because they're saying, well, I want to do this, but I'm being told I'm not really a podcaster if I don't do it this way. So that's where my frustration, and I know, like, Mark certainly, gets frustrated with some of that, which is why he speaks about it on the show.
Yeah, and that's kind of the idea behind the How to Podcast series is, I wanted it to be a variety of voices and community around podcasting, not one single voice giving their opinion on what you should and should not do in podcasting, because that's very one-sided. I love having multiple voices come on, and I learn from everybody that comes on as guest co-hosts. So that's kind of the framework of this. But the other part is, I feel like I want to be the person that goes around the theme park and rips down all the signs that say you must be this tall to ride this ride. I see that in podcasting. There's people putting up signs all the time saying it's not a podcast if ... And, you should only have this type of technology. You should only be on this type of hosting site. And I'm like, oh, come on, people. Like, it was meant to be open for everyone. There's probably good things you could do to be better at podcasting. But at the same time, if you have to spend X number of dollars to start, that's automatically going to exclude somebody, and their voice matters in podcasting. So I'm really looking to encourage podcasters and future podcasters to start and improve. Like, you can always get better. You can always get a better microphone. You can always get better headphones. Those are all things you can add to your mix. But you starting is the most important thing. You're never going to get to episode 20 if you never do episode 1. You have to start somewhere, right? So that's what I'm trying to build through this show, is just bringing people like you on to encourage them to do the thing. Start. You can do this. You have everything you need. There's so much knowledge in podcasting now that default setting that my episode 1 is going to be terrible, I don't know if that's really true anymore to the same extent, because there's so much knowledge now to help you get started the right way, that you're starting at a different place than 2005, 2006. Your episode 1 can be really quite good because of all the knowledge that's out there. So, Danny, somebody's going to reach out to you at Captivate. They're like, I want to start a podcast. I know zero about podcasting. I don't know anything about anything, but I'm reaching out to you because I heard about Captivate on the How to Podcast series. Danny, how do I start a podcast? What do I do? Where's my starting point? If you could give us kind of a few points to a new podcaster listening, what would you advise them?
So we have, and this is free for anybody. You don't have to be a Captivate user. We have a great Launch a Podcast course, and it takes you through everything. So it's like, why do you want to launch a podcast? What's your goal with it? And then we talk you through equipment, budgets, all that kind of stuff, editors, software tools, all that. So that I always sort of point people to that, because it is an amazing resource. And I'm not just saying that because it's Captivate. Like I say, anybody, we don't ask for your email or anything. You can just go to the link and just go through the course at your own time, and that helps you launch, your podcast. The main thing I normally say outside of that. I think we spoke about it earlier prior to recording, actually, was you just mentioned about buying hundreds of dollars worth of equipment, which you don't need. Get a nice little mic, but the main thing is try get your recording space to be fairly nice, and you don't have to like spend hundreds of dollars on like recording blankets or bass traps or whatever. Just make sure you've got a nice quiet space that's maybe got some soft furnishings around you, so a couple of cushions, a little soft chair where you're recording, and it just helps so much. I'm going to leave this for your domain because this is your expertise, mate, and you can talk to your listeners about it. But yeah, just like don't listen to people that say, well, you've got to buy a $400 microphone, you've got to get the Rodecaster Pro 2, and you've got to have a camera because you have to be on YouTube if you want to be serious about this. Like say, grab a $50 mic, not even that if you don't want it, just like you use your little mic that maybe comes through your phone, and speak into that to practice and start. And, find if you really want to experiment, find a free host like Spotify for podcasters where you can upload, publish to your heart's content, and it doesn't matter, if you're going to get listeners or not. You just want to sort of experiment, see if you enjoy podcasting, and then you can start to build from there. You think, okay, I really like this. Now what? And then that's when you can start to look, as you mentioned, all the different educational options that are out there for equipment, sound, editing, post process, and all that cool stuff, and take it from there. So, yeah, like you say, I think I'd probably say, ask yourself why, because I know we see it a lot, and I know this was part of the Pod Summit. There was a lot of conversations around this. A lot of podcasters or new people coming to the space, and even some existing ones about, okay, I've published my first episode. How do I monetize? Maybe switch that mindset a little bit. Yes, you can. Absolutely, you can monetize your podcast, but let's not try to think about that on episode 1. Let's just make sure you enjoy it first, and how you're going to bring listeners in that will help you monetize, and then we can go from there.
Yeah. Being in podcasting to the extent that you are, I'm a little jealous, I got to tell you. I would love to have this kind of experience and have the time that you have with some of the amazing people in podcasting. There's got to be something that you're not hearing enough of in podcasts about podcasting, your podcast and mine included. What kind of things do we think we need to talk about more in podcasts about podcasting?
That's a good one, Matt. I would probably say I'm going to go with editing. I feel that gets brushed aside too much because people hear the word editing and they think, oh, I need to know so much tech jargon. I need to know so many examples. I need to know how to use like the top of the range editing software from whoever. And I need to spend hours and hours and hours and hours and hours editing my episode. And you don't. Just tighten it up and make it a little bit more polished, because people will say, and it works for some podcasters, fair play. But I guarantee you, if you took 50 podcasts and you got 100 listeners and 45 of the podcasts weren't edited in any way whatsoever, but the other 5 had some form of editing, whether that was tightening up the flow of the conversation, removing weird noises or background noises, or just something that makes it sound more polished. And even if you want to put bumper music on it, an outro, an intro, that whatever you want to do. Like I said, it doesn't have to be super polished, but just tighten it up. I guarantee you that 100 of these listeners would probably gravitate, if the content was all the same, just to make it a nice level playing field, the only difference was 45 weren't edited. The listeners would gravitate towards the one where the extra amount of time is being spent making the listener experience just a little bit better than the other shows. Because at the end of the day, I mean, you're a listener as well as a podcaster. You've got finite time. You're not going to listen as I've listened to shows where the content has been amazing, but I could not, for the love of me, put myself through it anymore, listening to the audio, because there was just so many things wrong. And that sounds snobbish, and I apologize. But if I'm going to dedicate my time and give you an hour of my time or 30 minutes of my time, as opposed to someone else, I want it to be worth my while. And a lot of that can come down to, I mean, I can't remember the name of the condition. It's misnomer. I've got it on an episode, one of the 1 minute podcast episode, and it's just escaping at the moment. But it's basically noises like mouth clicks, chewing gum, something like that. It triggers people that suffer from this condition to such a degree they get highly anxious. They They can get angry. They can want to cause harm to others, etc. It's
Wow.
and just these little noises can be removed by taking a little bit of time afterwards and editing out. So yeah, I feel a lot of times people say, "Yeah, just be your authentic self. You don't have to worry about editing. Just record, upload, publish, make money." It's you know, I feel a little bit more editing talk needs to happen.
And right now we have coming up in November is National Podcast Post Month. NaPod Pomo is the famous hashtags that the
Yeah.
kids like to use. Have you ever done a NaPod Pomo 30 days and 30 podcast episodes in 30 days? Have you tried it?
No, I couldn't. I mean, technically, I guess I could with a 1 minute podcast tips because what's that?
Yeah.
30 minutes of my time essentially, but it's a bit more by the time I edit it and record whatever. But no, I mean, I couldn't. And fair, kudos to those that are taking part in it. My wife used to do the writing equivalent, the Nano Rimo.
Yeah, the writing one. Yeah.
She used to do that every year with her friends, and like the dedication that you have to put into that. So if you're doing, let's say your normal episode's 30 minutes each week, and now you've got to do 30 of them, then it's a lot. It's a lot. I mean, you might do shortened versions. I don't know. I don't know what the rules are for NanoPod more.
So can I confess that I am participating this year? I did it last year. Last year, 2 of my 8 shows participated. This year, 3 of my 8 shows are participating. So I have 90 episodes going out in November across 3 shows. So the How to Podcast series, what I've done is I've done clips of other podcasts to shine a light on other podcasters, including in and around podcasting. I did an episode for you guys. And what I did is I just took your trailer and a little snippet from the show, talked about the show, and then put links to your show.
Oh.
So you're an episode of my November release for the How to Podcast series. And I just want to leverage the idea that you can get this big bump of listenership and content over the month. Dad Space is my other podcast that's participating. It's a podcast for dads by dads, but it's also Movember.
Yeah.
So it's all around men's mental health and physical health. And so I'm bringing in the Movember side and doing a daily episode for the Dad Space podcast. That I'm doing book reviews for anything to do with the dad. And I've asked past guests to come back through SpeakPipe and answer 3 questions to help a dad. So they've recorded their messages for me. I'm not making the content. They're doing it for me. And it allows me to tie back into a previous episode in the catalog from a past guest to kind of reignite that episode and tell you, hey, this person's back to kind of give us more feedback. So I'm using it that way. And then Living the Next Chapter is another of my shows. It's an author podcast. Those are 45-minute episodes, and I have 30 in a row going out. So
like I say,
I'm in. I love it.
Kudos to you, mate.
It's crazy.
Fair play, hands up. I'd love to. Let me know how that goes. I'm genuinely interested in what that means. Like you say, like an uplift for your show. What listeners' feedback it gives you, etc. So yeah, I'd love to hear that as a follow up.
The only downside I could potentially see is the flood of content that's going out to my audience, where they're usually expecting 1 or 2 episodes a week. And now you got one every day. And they're just like, what is going on? Was there something broken? Like, how is this? How is this happening? So I've been working on this since August. So it's not something I started today in October to get ready for November. So anyways, I just wanted to put it out there as another alternative for those that are thinking about podcasting. Next November, 2025, you can start now. You can start recording, upload them to Captivate, future date them, and you're good to go, right?
That is true. Yeah. That takes a bit of pressure. If I was thinking more, you have to record and do everything in the month of November, and then push it out and what have you, which I thought, that could get kind of overwhelming. So yeah.
It's good. So Danny, as we wrap up, I know you got to run to your next thing, which is great. I'll put your website in the show notes with all the links to your podcast as well for everyone to go listen. But wrap us up, Danny, in your true in and around podcasting fashion and all things Danny Brown. I want to just throw the keys to you. I'm going to move to the passenger seat. Wrap us up. How do you want to encourage a podcaster as we close off today?
Yeah, I think you said it perfectly earlier, mate. Just start. Grab your phone, speak into it like you're walking down the park, walking to, commute. Well, maybe not commuting. You might get some strange looks in if you're like on a train or a bus or something. But yeah, just start. See what podcast you enjoy, what bits you'd like to take as your own idea, and just speak into your phone, hit record, see if it sounds good, and ask people. podcasters are very friendly by nature, and they will look to help you. 99% of podcasters will look to help you and want you to succeed. So ask people like Dave to, tips on editing, tips on recording, etc., and just start and see and have fun. See if you enjoy it, and then if you do, see what you need to do to move to the next part.
Everyone, all the information for Danny Brown will be in the show notes as always. That's how we do things. Danny, please pass along my thanks and my appreciation to your team. I know you have like a group chat where you guys do all things Captivate, and to Mark as well. Please let him know that he has yet another big fan in Canada. And eventually Mark will take over all of Canada, which is great. So thank you, Danny, for all things that you do at Captivate, for showing up as a podcaster yourself, and for all the great things you put into the world. I hope these things come back to you and your team in triple for what you guys put out into the world. So thank you so much for being a part of this.
Well, thank you. That's very kind of you, Dave, and I appreciate it.
Excellent. Everyone, all the information is always in the show notes. Go check out Danny and In and Around Podcasting, which I love, and all the good things happening at Captivate as well. Thanks, Danny.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks for listening to the podcast all the way through to the end. I love having these great guest co-hosts on the show to share their podcast with you. You have some homework to do. And what I'm asking of you is to go check out our featured guest co-host today. Go over and listen to their podcasts. The links are always in the show notes. And I'd love for you to go and give them your love and support. And I think if we can all do that for each other, podcasting will be a lot more fun for all of us. So it's time to do what you've asked others to do for you. It's time to do for this guest co-host. Links in the show notes. Go over and check out their show and leave them a review, do the follow, go listen to their episodes in full, the entirety of an episode, which again shows to the apps that it's a good podcast, because you're going there and you're staying to the end. It's probably one of the best ways you can help a podcaster grow their audience and be shown to more people is by simply going and listening wherever you listen to the very end, like you're doing right now here. This is the perfect way to signal to wherever you're listening on, this is a podcast worth promoting. And all of the apps want you to stay on as long as possible. So go over and listen to our guest co-host episode and leave them some feedback. If they have a buy me a coffee, send them a coffee. If they have a speak pipe, send them a voice message. If they have an email, send them an email. If they're on Instagram, send them a direct message. Do something to support our guest co-hosts. They've given up their time to be here with you, to be here with me, and we can give that back to them with time and attention, our love, our support. Thank you for doing all that for me as well. Here on the How to Podcast series, we'll talk to you soon for our next episode.